Hello, y'all. Welcome to the Job Search Journey with LT webinar. We are going to hear today from Dr. La'Tonya Rease Miles, founder of the Empowering First Gen College Students Facebook group and community, about her recent job search journey applying for senior level positions within higher education. Now, some of the aspects of this webinar are really broad, and they can be applied to other fields and other experiences, especially having to do with persistence, with activating your network and utilizing mentors, advocates, and sponsors, the interview process, how to negotiate, and a slew of other topics. So we're really thrilled that you're joining us today. My name is Heather Adams. I am Senior Program Manager of Transfer Initiatives at the College Excellence Program, which is part of the Aspen Institute. So please bear with us. We did have a few technical difficulties in the beginning of yesterday's recording. So the recording starts about 20 minutes in, but don't fret, you didn't miss much. We're really pretty thorough in the conversation. We also had a few questions and answers at the end that were recorded. And I think you're in luck because I don't think the conversation is over. It was clear from this conversation that I think we need to continue to have these sessions and really do some deep dives into the topic of the job search journey for first-gen professionals. So we hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we hope that we can continue this conversation with you further. We're getting to the real thing. Okay, I'm recording.
Okay, so
now we can start. Let's start again.
Yeah.
Well, let's
Okay,
start with recruiters. What are they?
Yeah.
What are they? Should you use them? Can you use them?
Yeah.
How do you deal with them?
Oh my gosh, I learned a lot about recruiters that, again, no one taught me, but I figured out. So there's a form of recruiting where you can say, I am going on the job market and I am going to work with a recruiter to help me find a job. So there is a service that's available. I would say especially for senior level positions, right? So again, you are saying I need help identifying jobs, and that person was like, I don't know if coach is the right word, but like a matching service. There we go. Okay, and then which I did not do. So let me clarify, I did not do that. My interaction with recruiters came after I applied, and a school, let's say Stanford, for example, already had hired a recruiter to manage their search process. So you'll have like a search committee, but then separate from that could be a search firm that's working with that committee. And the role of that, in that case, the role of the recruiter is to help find strong candidates that they feel are a good match. And so in those instances, the search firm, the recruiters are vetting people and also sharing a lot of information with the committee. I worked with a number of them for Stanford, Michigan State. Menlo didn't have a recruiter, didn't work with a search firm, a number of folks. I got to know them really well. And they can, Franklin and Marshall College too. These are people, I mean, I felt like I trusted them because they're trying to get as much information as possible to get who they feel is the strongest candidate. And they can give you really, really great feedback on like kind of really objective feedback on your materials and your, and your candidacy, your application as a whole.
So there's an interesting question about what the relationship was like with the firm or the recruiters, like the frequency of outreach, the follow-up, or the flow of it. Was there?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of regular phone calls. Like with one of the recruiters, we talked, like they handled the background check, they handled the reference checks. We discussed my salary expectations, and then they're like the conduit. So then they would summarize everything. Like their goal is to get a 360 view of you as a candidate and present that to the search committee and let the search committee make their own decisions. How did I get that feedback? What do you mean?
So in my experience, when I've applied to foundations and they have a recruiter that's outside recruiter working with the foundation, I would, if I didn't get the role, I just got, the thank you so much for applying. You're definitely a great candidate, but didn't make it to the next round or whatever. Like, how did you actually get that feedback on like what you needed to improve or what they were looking for? Because
Did you ask for it?
yeah,
Oh, they're whack. They should have given it to you.
honestly, I always ask and
Yeah.
I've never gotten it ever.
Yeah. And sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. But I mean, so for me, I just asked for it. No, just because I asked doesn't mean that they were explicit, because again, I found out after the fact that there was an internal candidate the whole time. So what can they tell you? You didn't get it because you weren't this person. There's nothing for me to change. So they're just like, oh, you were awesome. I mean, that's the feedback I got most of the time.
Yeah.
So, but one recruiter did share with me like, oh, your title at UCLA is tracks too low for this level of position. So I was a director, and that was weird. But I mean, I always ask for feedback, but know that sometimes you might not get it as well.
I love that. Thank you for talking on recruiters, because that seems like a thing that if you haven't ever done it, or when you get to a certain point in your career, no one's ever talked to you about it. And so all of a sudden it's a thing that folks are utilizing but haven't actually been prepped on or had any reference to. I do want to get to authentically marketing yourself. You made some points about this early on in the conversation, and then John sort of threw in a really great observation about the private sector, where you talk a lot about your personal brand within an organization and how you build it and manage it, but maybe we don't talk about that in higher ed. So you mind talking a little bit about how to sort of authentically market yourself and your transferable skills?
John, that was a great point. And funny enough, personal branding did come up as some feedback that I got for University of Tennessee. And mind you, I'm naming these schools. You can hear all the span of schools I applied for. But one ABP did talk about like strengthening my branding, which caught me off guard. Like you said, Heather, you don't really hear that as much in higher ed. What it made me do is just sort of step back and say, okay, who am I as a candidate? Who am I as a leader? And just be really more explicit about that in my cover letter. Her recommendation, not necessarily mine, but I'll just share what someone else said, is to like have 3 things you want people to know about you and stick to those 3 things in your interview. So whether you're student oriented or whether you are a team builder, or I don't know, whatever it is about you, very detailed, whatever, I'm not sure. But she just said, repeat those over, like make sure that they are reflected in your cover letter and mentioned in your sort of opening statement. Why do you want this job? And then in your closing statement, for example, is to sort of, that's another way to establish your brand. And I guess another thing about me, because then honestly, friends, like most of this is just going to come down to fit anyway. So they need to know who you are and you need to know who they are. So make sure you're you're going to have the right connection. So for me, outside of like being very student oriented, is, as you all know, social media is a really big part of my identity. So I just had to like own up to that. And if this was a school that was nervous about that, then this wouldn't be a good fit for me. But so I was very open about that. What I could do with it in the role.
And I think I remember having a conversation with you about your leadership philosophy, right? And that like actually consciously talking sort of as though that's your personal brand but intentionally talking about that in the interview process, which will shift us over to interview process questions. But I do think it's related because there were a couple of some feedback that you'd received about, maybe really framing that in a very clear way. Like you said, those 3 things that you keep bringing up and you have specific examples for, so that you've got the story that can show versus tell that these are the ways that I maneuver as a leader. I think that's related.
It is, and so Heather, I know you'll remember this feedback. It's helpful to take, if you get that feedback, to match it up to someone who you trust. And so I remember when I got this whole feedback about like the branding and everything, I was like, Heather, what do you think? And Heather was like some of what was said, you found, maybe you could talk about it from your perspective, if you thought how you felt that, if you felt that feedback was what you saw.
I love that you brought that up because frankly, I thought some of it was completely out of touch. Like I thought that they didn't really get the tone of you in the room, and some of it just seemed like very generic. The others seemed like off. But there were a few things that where you're like, okay, that's a good point. We can see that that's something that I could take as sort of I probably didn't talk about enough, or show an example of this style of my leadership, or where I've accomplished something that's in this framework, so they can really see it versus just sort of read it on my resume or read it in a cover letter. But yeah, some of it, this is a good thing about feedback when we get to how do you take in feedback and rejection, or like what people say about you, and not take it personally, but while still learning from it. But yeah, not everything they said was right on at all.
And I'm not in Tennessee, so it's all fine.
Yeah, there you go. So I want to shift to the interviews itself and the process, because there are many interviews, and we've had a lot of questions about how to ask the right questions in interviews, how to keep yourself motivated during interviews. I would love you to talk about your 14 months of interviews, and share how in the heck you survived that, and what tactics and strategies did you take to navigate those?
Okay, so just a reminder about the time frame, 14 months. So part of that was pre-COVID and part of that was during COVID, right? So just keep that in mind. So I had a couple, so Stanford, UCLA, that was before COVID. I feel like there was another one. Yeah, okay, definitely Stanford and UCLA was before COVID. And so, and in person as well. So, okay, wait, what was the question? Just how did I handle interviews?
Well, a little bit of that, like the
Okay,
actual process of you need to expect that there's going to be a lot of interviews. So
okay, yeah,
what does that even look like?
okay.
And then tactics and strategies that you actually took when you were in the interviews, or what you learned from them.
Okay, so before even the interviews, and I suspect many of you are already like doing the homework part of this, right? And the homework start this. I just got to get on a soapbox about one thing, which is because people have done this to me quite a bit, where they've applied for a job, let's say at a place where I work or a place that I'm close to, and then they ask me, oh, what, like, then ask for my feedback. So please, 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 if at all possible, before you apply, because people are like, no, no, I'll wait till I get to the interview. No, 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 no. It starts way before then. Let's say you're applying, let's say Menlo College. Let's say you're interested in a job at Menlo College. Don't get your application in and then ask me about it. You want to find out the culture. Like, culture is so critical, because that is what's going to shape your cover letter. This is no matter what job you're applying for. Even if it's the culture of McDonald's, you need to know the culture before you submit your application. So that goes into like your preparation for your interview as well, is finding out as much as you can before you get there, because you need to know if it's a good fit for you as well. So even though I applied for 24 jobs, there's a lot more jobs I didn't apply for because of, because of culture match, right? So anyway, so for the kinds of jobs I was applying for, I was prepared for really long interviews. And so, I mean, many of, like, we're very familiar with like the panel interviews, the first round. I didn't have a lot of just phone. Most people are actually find like this format to work really well. So most people are not just doing phone only anymore. And then once I advance, if I advance, then it was like, oh, I think Franklin and Marshall started at 8 a.m. and went to 5 on Zoom.
I remember
One,
that day. That was a long day for
that
you.
was a long
I
day.
was really worried about you during that day.
And then Menlo, one round was 11:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. With a little break. And then on campus, it was, because I did come to campus physically distanced with a mask, was like 9 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. or something like that. So yeah, stamina is really important, and so stay hydrated. But the questions weren't all that different from interview to interview. It's people wanting to know, of course, like, why are you interested in this job, and tell us about your leadership style. Those types of things. They were pretty common. There weren't too many anything that really caught me off guard, I would say.
I love that you. I'm just going to reiterate and kind of keep repeating these great lessons. Figure out the culture before. If you know somebody at that school, like, call them up, talk to them about the department and the division and the school itself, and because you don't want to be in that situation where you're already well into the process and then you get there and you're like, oof, this is, I want this job, but like, this is not feeling good or anything. And so, because a lot of questions came up about like, how do I ask the question about the culture and get an authentic, real answer from folks? And probably once you're in the interview part, you're not gonna get that. You're only really gonna get that real deal late, like if you know somebody there. But if you haven't gotten that, or you don't know anybody there beforehand, any suggestions on how to kind of strategically ask those questions while you're in the interview process to dig at that a little bit of what the culture is like and what the expectations are?
Some of it could come from asking about why the position is vacant. Why they leave, and you could get some hemming and hawing, or they'll just tell you it's brand new, or why is it brand new? I would often ask that, what is the occasion for this position? That tells you a lot, actually. I tended to apply for jobs where it was brand new. Like, my strength is in building or rebuilding, I would say. And so I was more attracted to a new job, or attracted to a job where someone had left because they wanted a change. So that appealed to me. Some of that I got before. Some of it was written in the job description. Some of it I got just by talking to people who know about it. But much of the information, I honestly, most of the information I gathered about culture, I got not from the search committee. You can also get a lot by talking to students there, but it mostly came from people who knew that institution.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I want to let people know it's about 4 minutes to the hour. We're recording this now, and we will make sure that we have information up. I'm going to keep going and asking some questions, but it is Sunday, or whatever day it is where you are, whatever hour it is where you are listening to this. We understand if you need to jet out, but I am keeping track of the questions, and I'm going to shift into motivation and keeping your motivation up throughout this process for our next little section. You were put through it. Like, this was 14 months of a marathon, and with huge ups and downs.
Yeah.
How did you keep motivated, and how did you we'll talk about internalizing and taking rejection or not taking rejection personally and all of those things, but what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, well, I'm chuckling because Heather knows, like, full well. For one of those institutions, not only was I a finalist, like, they did a reference check, they did a background check, we discussed salary, and other people, so my mentors or sponsors who I told you all about, who were keeping tabs on me, because I would just update them like, this is where I am in the process, or this is how far I've gotten. And I remember one or two of them saying, oh, well, the next step, like once they've done the background check and discussed salary, is an offer, right? So all of us were prepared for an offer, and it did not come, right? And I got a call from the recruiter, the search firm to say, sorry, but the committee went in a different direction. So Heather knows all that. But I honestly, I had to depersonalize. It's a weird sort of compartmentalization that happens where on the one hand, you have to imagine yourself in the role because you want to know, you have to figure out if this is something you like, but you can't do it so much to a degree that you don't apply to anything else, or like, oh my God, this is the one, like The Bachelor or something like that. You just can't get that deep. You can't get that connected. So however way you are able to depersonalize, that is what I had to do. And so I guess in that particular instance, I don't know. I just wanted to, ask for some feedback from the recruiter, and the recruiter they were actually really awesome. So the recruiter was just like, we are determined to help you get your next job. Like, this is not I think they were pulling for me, but the committee went a different direction. So I guess practically speaking, there were times where I just had to stop and not look at jobs, not do anything related to a job search, and then just get back into the saddle. I would ride my bike and clear my head and listen to probably Cardi B or something, and then just keep going.
I love that. LT, your mic is rubbing against your jacket just a little bit. FYI.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
So I love that, related to motivation and this, how to kind of deal with the process. You talked a little bit about this, but any suggestions for healthy approaches to growth and areas for learning and development? So as you're, giving yourself feedback, and as other people are giving you feedback throughout this process, how did you go about looking at those as growth and learning opportunities? Any tips for that?
I mean, my main tip was knowing my worth, right? I guess the main thing that kept me going was that there was nothing that told me that I needed to stay at UCLA. Nothing. Everything in my body told me it was time to go. And I had to like hold on to that. So having already made a decision, a commitment actually to leaving and to moving on, it was just more about how do I sustain myself in the process. And so I've said many times already, is really checking in with sponsors, checking in with people who know me really well to say, to like give me more feedback. But when I say feedback, it wasn't like, oh, I needed to practice or anything like that. So I'm done with the search, and so we can go back and look. But the reality is that I applied for 24 jobs and had 10 sort of, what do you call it? Got 10 positive responses from institutions and was a finalist 6 times. So 1 out of 4 times I was a finalist. Like, that's another way to look at it. So I was everyone told me I'm doing everything right. So it was kind of recognizing there were many things outside of my control. And I just had to remind myself of that. Like, okay. And when you first don't get the job, you don't know that there was an internal candidate. It's only when you go back and look on LinkedIn, like, oh, I wonder what happened to that position at University of Tennessee. Oh, she hired someone she already knew. So I didn't know that when I first didn't get the job. So it was trying not to be obsessive with the position. And it sounds cliche, and sometimes it was hard to hear in the moment, but many of you would say things like, you got to hold out for the right job. Like that job wasn't meant for you. And it can be hard to hear at the moment, but it's probably true.
So much of it is about fit, right? Like, are you going to fit? Is that the perfect, person for the perfect role and all of that? Okay, so you talked about being a finalist. We're shifting into our next mode of conversation, which is all about tips about being a finalist. And we want to get into negotiation, salary, expectations on salary. There's a lot of questions about, what does that look like? How does one value themselves? And then what does the negotiation process even look like? And I need tips on this, as you know.
And I gave Heather tips too. Okay, so oftentimes people jump right to salary, so I'll start with salary, but that's not the only thing you can negotiate. And if you all have other things, please put them in the chat for one another as well. But salary is like an obvious one. I remember one of the schools had reached out, it was Franklin and Marshall, about, they asked me something about, the recruiter asked me my salary requirement.
Right. Or range or something. Didn't she
Something
say,
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit. So what I did was I called Julie Sina. I called my mentor slash sponsor and said, how do I respond to this? Right? Because this wasn't the school making the offer. This was the conduit person like asking me. And she said, dude, it blew my mind. She said, ask the recruiter what they would recommend. I was like, I could do that? And she said, yes, the recruiter is like your agent. They're advocating for you. And the recruiter came up with the number. I didn't even come up with the number. I was like, I can ask for this money. And the recruiter was like, oh, I think it should be blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay. I didn't get that job, but I didn't know that you could do that. That's all I'm saying, right? This is why sponsorship, hidden curriculum, us being, especially those of us who are first gen, Julie Siner's first gen as well, like she understood my situation. So that was that particular situation. But so the interesting thing with Menlo in this particular position, salary, so they actually changed the salary before I even, number one, before I got the offer and could negotiate, because it was just weird because of COVID. Like the senior leadership had just voted to, they all took salary cuts. So they, in advance of that, actually upped the salary before I could even ask. So I didn't negotiate. I didn't even really have an opportunity to negotiate salary with this particular position. I did get, they also offered me housing, which I didn't even have to negotiate that. They offered housing. So that helps too. Those of you who are familiar with the Bay Area, is really, really expensive here. Atherton is literally the most expensive zip code in the country right now. So that was a tremendous thing. So I was like, okay, well, what else can I ask for? Since I didn't have to negotiate those two, like those are the, not housing normally, but salary tends to be the go-to. Also, just technology devices. I think Gustavo mentioned something about vacation and whatnot. I asked about moving expenses, and then they're like, oh, okay, rewrite the contract. And so some people, Heather, did you get money up front for moving expenses, or are you turning in receipts?
No, they actually just, instead of moving expenses, they just upped my salary a little bit and just said, like, eventually this will hopefully cover your moving costs. And I was fine with that because it made my yearly salary higher. It was not money up front though. So in terms of having to move cross country immediately and kind of be in that, it wasn't going to be helpful to me in the immediate, but for my situation, it was better for the long term. I would also say some great advice that LT gave me is just be just ask, just be straight up. I was so like, wiggly about it. I just got uncomfortable. And like, even though I kind of knew the worth, like I didn't, I got it. I could have a conversation with LT about it. But then once I got to the actual conversation with my supervisor or the hiring manager, I was all like squishy about it. Instead of just going, here's my number. give me a call when you're ready, like tell me yes or no, and then we'll go from there. And I just made a mistake of not doing that and being too wiggly and squishy about it and squirmy about it in my own consciousness and communication about it. And that's not great. It doesn't show confidence, but it also doesn't necessarily get you what you're requesting or what you would like. So that was something I wish I had been more streamlined and really straightforward about.
Well, one thing I want to add to that, especially in COVID, or especially just any time where like, oh my God, jobs are precious. It's a hirer's market kind of thing. I think our inclination is to say yes immediately, right? And if nothing else for yourself, don't say yes right away. Thank them, express enthusiasm for the offer. But even if you just say, I need to talk it over with my family, like that's just like a cut and paste thing you can say, again, that increases your value as well. But I think I totally get it. I can understand. You're like, no, but I will have to hold on. I don't want them to give this offer to someone else. Well, if they would have done that if they hired you. They want you, and this is your time to this is the one time you can negotiate, to be honest. So please take advantage of it. And I saw it real quick, and someone put in the chat that it does take practice. Absolutely. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but yeah, and again, you're just asking. Like for me, I just said, is there funding available for moving expenses? That's it. Don't get into, I got my grandma living with me, and just straightforward question. You don't have to like justify why you're asking or anything like that. The reality is that most people expect you to negotiate. That is the truth. They expect you to negotiate and are often surprised when people don't negotiate.
Or I would add to that, don't be surprised that if it's in the application where they ask you what your salary range or desire is, that they are going to probably take you up on that. So if you put that you want this amount of money, and they come back and say, well, here's this amount of money, and you go, oh, well, I'd like a little more. And they're like, well, but you put this in your application. Like, be ready for, really think it through and discuss it, because you might actually get what you ask for, and they do look at that stuff. They do go back to it. So negotiation doesn't necessarily start at the end, I guess is what I'm saying. It's kind of it's relevant all the way through the process. Gustavo asked a question about navigating or negotiating job description duties. And this is interesting. Is that something that you could do? Like, yes, I can do that, but if I take the position, I won't be doing this, fill in the blank.
Well,
is that something you would do?
That necessarily. I won't do. I did, Gustavo. That is a fantastic question. That is what I did coming to UCLA. I asked part of accepting my position as director of first year experience was me saying I'm going to do first gen initiatives. That was not in the job description initially. So there were some things I said at the beginning that I wanted to do. I probably, now that I think about it, I probably have said something similar about Menlo, about it's not written here, but this is the piece that I want. That's a really great thing too. That shows like a lot of savviness. It shows that you kind of know the place. You think you have a good handle on it. It's hard, but we just have to move out of position of just being grateful for whatever is there, whether it's the money or the job description or the title. You can negotiate your title. You do going into.
Yep, absolutely. And that's another thing that was great about some of the positions that you specifically chose for yourself. As you mentioned, you tend to like to, you're great at rebuilding and building, and also liking to look for new positions that are not necessarily defined yet. And this is can be a blessing and a curse, but if it's a brand new position and you're sort of defining the role as you go, that can be a terrific thing, but it can also be a catch-all thing. So even better for kind of Gustavo's question about, making sure you're kind of putting some structure and some parameters in place right away of, these are the things that we'll focus on in this role. And you didn't mention first gen, but let's pull that in. Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that.
You have to approach these jobs like you have the job, right? And so what would you do on day one? Like no matter where you're applying, like what would you want to handle, and like really go in with those ideas. I bring this up being on the other side of having been on a number of searches and hired folks, if we don't already have a person in mind, right? Those people who have done their homework, who have like stalked me on LinkedIn without me knowing, and speaking directly to some things that they could do right away. Those are the people that stand out.
Absolutely. Still on this negotiation train, phrasing, negotiating the title. Any suggestions on kind of phrasing that? Jessica's mentioning that she did that once, but kind of last minute, so didn't put a lot of thought into it. Like, how would you approach that?
Well, again, it's not for just the way you approach anything. You're not there to demand. You're there to ask, like, what are some frame it as an opportunity. Like, oh, is there opportunity to rethink this title? Either you could ask as a condition of accepting, or maybe can we revisit this in 6 months' time? But you've already put it on the table already.
Love that. So we have some random other questions that didn't necessarily fit into a category or that we kind of skipped over. But before I dive into that, any questions here just in our last little bit, like things that are coming up, things that are rolling around in your head? Just like unmute yourself and let us know what you're thinking.
This is John.
LinkedIn.
I'll jump in before I leave real quick. And just to share, this is just really relevant. I made the switch recently going from education sector and jumping into the private sector corporate world. And this is accentuated even more so to be able to do this. So I think the insights you're getting from Heather and LT are really, really relevant as a first gen transfer student. Navigating the corporate sector recruitment cycle was super intense, and you have to tap into the people you know. I was valuing myself here, and they were valuing me here, and I wasn't even seeing it, from the salary negotiations to benefits, packages, and all. You're just helpful that you got more than what your parents had or what you had before.
Speak on it.
I think this is extremely relevant whether you're staying in education sector. And the other thing I would just call out before I drop off is, and there's great opportunities in education sector happening outside of education within the private sector. Ed tech is on fire now. Digital transformation is not a choice anymore in higher ed. And I work at a company called Adobe, but companies from like Salesforce to Google to Microsoft to companies that you don't even know that are on the radar screen are really doing some pretty amazing stuff. And they're going to expect you to have what LT and Heather are talking about going into it. And so I just share that experience that all this is really, really relevant, whether you're looking for jobs within private or public educational institutions, or you're going to go corporate or private sector. And I suffered a lot going through this whole recruitment process within companies to be able to do that. I think as first gen transfers, all those things that we have, it's impactful because there's not a lot of people like you when you're in these certain roles that you have. So I just wanted to share that. What's Adobe? That's another conversation. Go to my LinkedIn profile, you can see it. But we can do another section on
they might be
corporate
teasing you, John.
sector.
They might be razzing you.
Yeah. But
I think I hear a series coming on. I think I hear a series coming on. I think we might have to do one of these on ed tech.
Heather and LT, you guys are onto something here. I think, and I do think the private sector needs people who work in education to go into that sector, because one thing is to talk about the sector. The one thing is knowing the sector inside out. That was my advantage going into the sector. I don't know corporate, but I told them I speak the language of education. right? And that's a different language that a lot of people don't know. They see the education sector as a business opportunity, and you can influence that with your education experience. So happy to, if you guys build on something like this, let's go for it.
All right.
So, and
All
you're right,
right.
ed tech doesn't know students, but that's why ed tech needs to hire people who come from education, who know students, right? And it's a great opportunity for you to impact ed tech, but it's a great opportunity for those of us like me who I didn't know corporate. I thought that was out of my reach. And I got recruited in my late 40, late 48 going into this. So but this is LT show and Heather's. I got to drop, but LT and Heather, congratulations.
John,
It's
thank you so
wonderful. I
much, John.
message you
You
guys
too.
privately, and so we can catch
Do you
up,
mind if I
okay?
share your link? Do you mind if I shared your LinkedIn for people? Someone just asked in the chat. Can I share your
Yeah,
LinkedIn profile with people?
they go right ahead. That's fine. Happy to do
Okay,
that. We have to support each other to be able to do this. All right.
will
Bye,
do.
everyone. Heather
See
and
you
LT, we'll
soon,
catch
John.
up soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh,
Thank you
so
so much.
important.
Yes. I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
just
go
wanted
for
to
it.
ask another question, but did you want to go, Heather?
No, go
No.
for it.
Okay.
Go for it. This is open question
So-
time.
So I'm so grateful to be here and have this conversation. And I agree that it needs to be a series because there's always so much to talk about. Actually wanted to talk to you about having interviews via Zoom during this time. And when they ask you a question, like, do you think about one or two examples that you want to focus on, or do you try to cover as many things as you can? How short or long do you keep your responses?
Ooh, love these questions. So the Zoom part of it for me, I was really adept with Zoom. So I can't think of like a strategy that was different beyond sort of don't look at the screen, look at the light, like look at your camera, like that little tip. I work with Chantel, I should say, Professor Chantel Marshall, who is at Nevada State College. She actually is a former mentee of mine, but she loves interview prep and all that. And one of her strong recommendations is one detailed answer goes a long way. And that might be something that I ended up tweaking now that I think about it. My inclination is to talk about a lot of different things in one answer, but I think the point isn't, I think they just want to hear how you think. Just keeping that in mind. So being able to provide one really strong example and then be very explicit about how it answers the question, but also and how that example you gave is an indication of what you could do can be applied in another place. And so really kind of spoon feeding the interviewers, I found, worked really well. That was a really great question, Lena.
So great. That was actually one of the ones I know we didn't get to that was on my list. So I'm so thrilled you jumped in. Any others, folks? I have some that we haven't gotten to, but feel free to jump in. I'd love to hear your voices and hear what you're thinking about. I know that LinkedIn came up a lot. There were some LinkedIn questions. Specifically, there were questions about, I'm scrolling because we've talked a lot in the chat. LinkedIn, should you get LinkedIn Premium or just use the regular for your searches? LinkedIn photos, do they truly make a difference?
So LinkedIn honestly didn't help me get this job, right? And I do need, Heather, make sure I tell the story of Sylvia Hurtado before we go, because that's crucial.
Yep.
I mean, Yinling Sheck, a good friend of mine, recommended that I change my photos. She said the one that I had was too informal, and she recommended I have a bunch of shoots, and so she's like one that shows your face. Her rationale was for recruiters who were looking. I didn't get my job from a recruiter, so that wasn't the case for me. It certainly doesn't hurt to have a LinkedIn account. Oftentimes, though, I found it more people reach out to me who are looking for jobs than me getting a job from it. So, that's fine.
I would say though, I agree in terms of the like actual job search, but I would say in terms of building your network and who you know at different institutions nationally, and also when you're in the job search, premium's not a bad thing to have, because you can actually see who's viewing your profile. And often when I got close to a job, a lot of people from that institution were looking at my profile, and I needed to know that because I needed to make sure my profile looked good, and it hadn't originally. And so folks do go to it to check you out, to see who you are, to see what's up with, if you seem like you're going to fit into their culture. And I noticed quite a lot of like from associates to like to higher level people were going and looking, because premium allows you to see who's looking at your account. So it's expensive, so long term I don't think it's sustainable, but it's not bad if you're in the heat of it and you're maybe getting close to a couple of jobs and you want to make sure that you're kind of keeping tabs on things. Do you know if they look you? Yes. So sorry, Tamisha just asked if they look you up. Yeah, they do often look you up.
I think Rebecca was trying to jump in.
So yes, thank you.
Rebecca.
I have a quick question. Going back to the negotiating piece. If your husband or significant other or your partner is a member of the faculty, so when one of you gets a job, you come with your other half. So what negotiating tips do you have, or how does that look like? And LT, I guess that's for me. I assume that I'm hoping that your husband got something too, and I'm just wondering what that looks like, because when people get hired in our institution, many times their faculty spouse also gets an offer. I see that as it happens. So I'm just wondering what that looks like and what does exactly look like in terms of the negotiating. If you get an offer and then, okay, now I need you to give my husband a job too. How does that look like?
Yeah, so I could have pushed for that, been a little bit more direct if my husband wanted to work here. So he's not as interested in working specifically at this school. I mean, it's a small school. We like see each other way too much if we did that. But what I did do was, knowing that my husband needed a job, was send his resume to my boss, the VP, and asked her to share his resume within her networks, right? Because that's how people get jobs, is through the networks. But if you have special circumstances, let's say, Rebecca, you mentioned faculty hires or things like that, it's far more common for that to happen. And I don't know if Joy's still here. I don't know if she and her partner did something similar, but know that that's another, I guess the point is that it could be another component depending on the type of position you have and what your household situation looks like. So for us, my husband isn't, like I said, isn't explicitly trying to work at Menlo, but everyone here on this campus knows that he is actively looking. So to bring them into the process, because they want to keep me here, right? So they see that as part of, retention, I guess is what I want to get at. But I'm so glad you brought that up. Like, those are the other things people may not be as aware of, Rebecca.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's, some of us are the trailing spouses, right? So we pretty much go wherever our faculty, in this case, my husband is, and then we kind of we're more tied to our institutions.
That's right.
And so, but that piece, I just thank you for bringing that up, because I just want to make sure that it's a reasonable expectation, I guess, to ask in the negotiating part.
Yep, absolutely. You brought this up, so kudos to you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and thank you so much, because I had gotten that from you, and I think that's such an important question. And I didn't know that that's a great feedback, LT. I didn't realize that you'd kind of shared that, and like, just you never know who knows somebody who's, yeah.
Well, my husband's in IT and we're in Silicon Valley, so I thought it didn't hurt.
I guess, yeah. I guess, duh, right? That's probably really smart. Anybody else? Because I know there's a few I have on my list, but feel free to. We'd love to hear your gorgeous voices. If you have anything that you're dying to know. Our last.
I'd love to hear the Sylvia story.
There we go. That's our last. Yeah. Do you wanna dive into the story of this role and where you are now?
Yeah, let me cue this up. Thanks, Deb. So again, going back to what I was saying before, and let me quote my good friend Dr. Kenny Donaldson, who's like, you can't love these institutions, right? So, so I was like, I am a free agent. I'm on the market. I don't feel loyalty to any of them. Okay, so let me say that part. So I was juggling 3 active job searches. Berkeley, Compton College, and Menlo will come into Berkeley and Compton College. And then also a player is a ed tech company. Man, Heather, what's the name of it? Guild Education. Guild. Like, so they were courting me as well, right? And the issue with Guild, you all should take a look at Guild. Because they're doing remote work.
I can put their link. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put their link in the chat.
Put their link in there. And I was talking to them. So again, a job hadn't even posted yet, but I know I was on their radar. They were actively looking at me on LinkedIn anyway. So Sylvia Hurtado reached out to Professor Sylvia Hurtado, leading expert on Latinx students and first-gen students, had reached out to me regarding a work-related matter on the UCLA campus, my home campus, regarding first-gen students. And, there was just some frustration around the future direction of that program and all that. And so she was trying to ask me oh, can you work this out? And can you talk to your supervisor, get a title change and all these types of things. And I was like, this marriage is over with UCLA, so that's not going to happen. Well, anyhow, what did happen was out of the blue, she forwarded me this job description from Menlo College. And she said, I think you should take a look at it. And then I'm like, okay, if Sylvia Hurtado tells me I need to do something, I need to do it, because that's just who she is. I didn't know anything about this school, nothing. And it was 2 days before the application. And so I took a look, I did that sort of research, all that I could and everything, and put together the application and the cover letter. And then found out really quickly I was invited for a first round interview. So at this point, I'm juggling Compton College, UC Berkeley, and Menlo College. At one point, I thought I was headed to Compton. It was like moving really quickly and all that. And Menlo just like, here's Compton running far ahead. Menlo just like do, and just came out of nowhere. So what I didn't know, this ties it all together, is Professor Hurtado got that job description from her colleague who was on the search committee. Okay. So her colleague says, hey, Sylvia, I know you know good people. Can you forward this? Sylvia sends it to me. Meanwhile, they continue to, I wasn't even aware of this. They're continuing to talk to one another. And Sylvia's sharing feedback with her about my work at UCLA. So I guess maybe the thing, people are always watching you. You don't even know it. You don't even know that. So Sylvia was sponsoring me without me even asking her to sponsor me, but she knew that I was looking for a job. And so that's the other key. She knew I was actively looking, which is why she sent me the job. And if nobody knows, if you're like all quiet about it and you're not gonna tell anybody until you get the interview, you're gonna miss out on some things. So somebody needs to know, key people need to know that you're looking. And so they were, Sylvia, meanwhile, was like, oh, you all better get her now because she's gonna go to Berkeley. Like I didn't. And again, she wasn't sharing that feedback with me. I found this out later. But having her sponsorship was crucial. So of course, I had to interview strong and I had to show that I was competent, but her stamp of approval was the major difference. And that's the frustrating part, is making sure we have that. Like, you can redo your cover letter a gazillion times and you can keep tweaking your LinkedIn. That's probably not going to make the difference for you. I'm just going to be honest. It's like someone vouching for you and them feeling comfortable hiring someone that they, they're just learning from an interview process. Having the validation from someone that they trust was the main thing.
In that line of thinking, and you talked a little bit about this, about what excited you about the new position over like the one at Cal or Compton College, but I know we had a couple of conversations about this, and obviously the job offer was great, but what were other things about this position that made you really excited about it over the others?
Yeah, especially knowing that I have, you can quote me of saying, I'm not gonna work in student affairs again. Like, I literally told Kevin Doherty this, I was like, bruh, I'm out. But it really was what the oversight was, the opportunity. Like, it's really, really important for me to be able to build things and not be micromanaged, and having the trust of a supervisor. So I was trying to get as much information as I could to see if that was possible. Speaking with the students, I was on Instagram. I looked at every post. I found videos that Black students made about their experience here, which gave me insight into the school, which showed me like, yes, this is a place where I want to be. So that part, I liked that it was. I was actively looking for something small. Like, I really, really enjoyed my time working at LMU, which is another small private school. So I was hoping to get that back. Berkeley was the anomaly. Berkeley was just me saying, I've got capital in the UC system. I'm going to hang on to, like, oh, I'm vested. Let me stay vested, right? But what I really wanted was a small campus, so that I could like have a really big impact, a major impact right away, an immediate impact, I should say, right away. So Menlo sort of hit that. It's in the Bay. I knew that, like, my husband, he preferred to be in California. So there was just so many, like, everything was like boom, 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 boom. It's not perfect, but it covered so many things.
I would say it also just aligned with what you were really desiring to do next, in that innovative spirit, that there was room there for you to really go into the next level of stuff that you wanted to do. Whereas some of the others were more restrictive in terms of the kind of goals and priorities of the position. So I can't wait to see what you get up to in this amazing new role. I know that there are a few random questions we haven't gotten to, but I have a feeling that this is probably going to be a series, and I think that's a really nice place to wrap up, because we've talked about so much. We've recorded this, so we're going to make sure to post it. LT, any last bits of advice? I mean, obviously, we can't underestimate the importance of sponsorship, strategy when it comes to everything from LinkedIn to to how you're branding yourself, to how you're building your network. But any other last?
Yeah, I wanted to address, yes, Deb, I saw something that Deb put in the chat about sponsorship, and finding those or creating opportunities to get that sponsorship. One thing that did help me at UCLA, at LMU, there was a leadership series that was offered that gave me a lot of insight as to how higher ed educations work from a budgetary standpoint, to just it was a range of things. And they actually assigned you a mentor who was a senior leader. So that helped me. And then so some schools may have that. Sometimes ACPA or NASPA offers that. And if those aren't available, I would, again, use that Facebook group or use LinkedIn. There are actually a number of college, they're quiet, but you all know there's a lot of senior people in that Facebook group, and including college presidents. So Keith Curry, the president of Compton College, is in there. Russell Lowry Hart from Amarillo College. They're just low key hanging back, but they wouldn't be there if they weren't you know, they're getting something out of it as well. So sometimes just reaching out to someone that just ask, how did you get where you are? Russell, tell me, how did you get where you are? And he'll tell you that story all day long. But again, you getting on someone, you want to get on someone's radar. That's what it is. You want to get on somebody's radar. So ideally, and again, it doesn't work out all the time, but I'm telling you, this strategy is better than you cold applying to someplace. The cold application, that rarely works out. My son, I'll just tell you all straight out, my son, he just got a job working remotely for a startup company, but he knew about the job before the job was posted. Literally, he knew about the job. So being in that kind of position is the most ideal, if possible. But I understand that doesn't always happen. But there are times where, okay, I'm sorry, I have to use basketball. I'm going to use a basketball analogy, and it may not always work. But ideally, you want to be the person who can create your own shot and not just be on the perimeter waiting for somebody to feed you the ball. Sometimes you just have to kind of go out there and just let someone know that you're looking without, you know, being, you got to be careful. You don't want to be annoying. But you do want to set it up as just, I find someone who's, again, who's working at a place where you want to work or doing something you want to do, and just honestly, like authentically get to know them before you start asking for a job or anything like that. And I've said it a few times, but it really does help when people know that you're looking. So that Vinkia is a great example. But I know she's been looking for jobs, and when things come up, and I think and Jessica too, I will send them things like, oh, boop, 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 just real quick forward or something like that. And if I can sponsor, I will. Yeah. Before a job, just know, before a job gets posted, it's been vetted. It's been vetted so many times internally before you even see it on a job posting.
Well, LT, I have learned so much. I hope this has been really helpful to everybody else to just kind of chat about the real deal of what's going on and what this could look like. Please, if you're not already in the Empowering First Gen College Students group, I posted the link. Join us, join Transfer Nation if you want. If you're into the transfer world and transfer advocacy, come and join us there. I have a feeling we're going to have to continue this conversation because there's so many threads here that I really want to get to, and some really specific things, like if we have templates for follow-up questions and the negotiation tips and tactics. So I'll talk to LT. Maybe I can wrangle her into some to a new series. Who knows? We'll see. We promise we'll follow through. Join us, find us on LinkedIn, and thank you so much for spending a little bit of your day with us having this great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you got as much out of this conversation as I know I personally did, but it really meant a lot to both LT and I to be able to really have a real deal, honest conversation about the job search. This is stuff that sometimes people feel uncomfortable talking about or are not sure who to talk to about it. I think that makes sense. And so this space was really important for both of us. So we really appreciate your time that you put into this. Any of the resources or links that were mentioned in the webinar, we're going to try to post in the comment section of whatever platform this webinar is posted on. So hopefully you didn't miss anything there. We'll be sure to repeat some links and some resources that might be of interest. Thanks, y'all. See you next time.